This is an Abundant Insight. Today we have Ryan Bishop with Upstream Sales Consultants. Ryan works with companies to grow their sales by building sales processes and drive execution of their sales. He works across the country with different industries. Typically, they're complex sales, long sales cycles in industries including offshore, maritime, and oil and gas. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks a lot, Carl. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So at Abundant, we're all about processes. We love to organize things. So how do you do that with a sales process? Is that something that most companies have in place?
Well, it's you would think so, right? But for the most part, what I see when I come into typically a small to mid-sized organization is about 75% of the time, this is the operating number at the moment, about 75% of the small to mid-sized companies don't have a documented sales process. It's not true to say they don't have a process, because everyone, if they've sold anything, they have a sales process, right? But really, about 75% of the time, they don't have anything documented, and really sales guys and sales leaders are just out there doing what they think is best to serve their clients and serve their customer or their company.
Okay. Well, if they don't have a sales process in place, where do you start? What should they be thinking about?
Sure. Yeah, good question. Maybe it's worth talking a little bit about why having a sales process is a good thing, and then I'm happy to share a little bit of ideas on how you get there in the first place. So a few reasons to have it. Really, it's all about action. A sales process is about what are the actions that we do. I'm blowing up over there. It's sales process is just the things we do to push a prospect from the early stages of awareness to a closed deal. So it's really all about action. And getting the sales process right will help you understand what actions truly drive my growth ambition, and then helps us ultimately grow through a concentration on those actions. So, a sales process, why have it? First off is repeatability. Going out there and doing the same things every time will typically lead to the same results, right? That's the idea. Let's figure out what works, and we'll go out there and scale. So giving a predictability to scalability is often has a lot to do with your adherence to that process. Also helping to know where you are in a sale and helping build tools to help sellers be more effective. If they're doing the same things every time, they're probably running into similar problems, and you can build tools for them to help them overcome those problems with their clients. And then really, as a business leader, you need to forecast. You need to really let your organization know, look upstream, what's coming from the sales pipeline, and then what's going to be feeding your operations team in a short period of time. And then really all that put together leads to a common language. Knowing what each stage means, both in your sales organization, but then across departments is critical. So we're all speaking the same language. There's a huge efficiency gain when we start doing that. But I jumped ahead, and what you asked was, how do you start getting into a sales process? And really, there's a few things, but the most critical and sometimes the most painstaking is just documenting the process. Again, everyone has a process. Oftentimes, it's not effective or it's not documented, but getting it down on paper, pulling all the stakeholders in your organization together and saying, how do we go about sales? Keeping the buying process of the customer in mind. How do we help push them down that buying process with us as the ultimate answer at the end? It starts with documenting. Put it down on paper, but understand this doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be a work in progress. You're going to iterate over time, but you want something that's going to help orient your whole team. Getting it down on paper. Once it's on paper, don't let it live on that document. Pull it into a CRM system. I think everyone's heard of CRM. Most people have heard of Salesforce.com, but that's rarely the right answer, because that's a big institutional tool. There's a lot of other tools that can really move the needle much more quickly for a client at a much lower price. And then the last thing is just confirm. Make sure you're sitting down and reviewing your sales process weekly with your sellers, making sure your CRM will tell you what they're doing on a regular basis. Are they following that sales process? Are they working it as it should be? And if they're pushing back, a business leader should listen. Listen, why are they pushing back? Are they just not used to the discipline that's being used in the sales process, or is there truly a need for that sales process to be tweaked? This is a chance to learn as a business leader, and then put a better process in place. And not just that one seller that's pushing back, you can help affect positively all the sellers on your team.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm hearing is the sales process drives growth more effectively. That's the big why. Is that a good way to think of it?
Yeah, and just a point to make here too on that, it's perfectly accurate what you just said. Putting that sales process down on paper, that in itself, it's really not going to do much. But if it leads to different action in the field, when it leads to a concentration of action, or maybe a fine tuning of what we do to go build those sales, build that sales pipeline, that's when it really moves the needle. When you get it all out of your head, you get past assumptions. I mean, it's the same thing we've seen with the what Abundant's offering. It helps. It's a great tool to help pull it out of your head, understand what are we trying to do, and then build around those things once it's all out in front of us and institutionalized in a great tool like a CRM system.
Mm-hmm. Right. I can see where, once you've kind of put the thought process down, you got your whiteboard or your paper, and you've walked through and you've been refining it, then the CRM is a way to, like you say, institutionalize it so that we keep doing it and we don't kind of drift off track. So is
Yeah.
that a
What
good
I
way to
find
think about it?
too. Oh, I'm sorry, Carl. What was that?
Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, it's absolutely a good way to think about it. And I mean, most people in an organization, they can put their hand on their heart and say, I'm really doing everything I think I should be doing to drive my organization, to bring the results in that I think my company wants. But rather than keeping it in their heads and saying, here's what I think I should be doing, man, there's so much freedom to a business leader giving a salesperson crystal clear guidance on, you do these things and you will be successful. Don't make them go out and figure it out for themselves. It's also a great way to help onboarding, where you say, if a successful salesperson does this, and be very prescriptive on that action. I mean, that's what a sales process is for, really.
That's a great insight. So it's not just about your experienced people, it's also about growing your company, bringing in new people into your sales team.
Yeah, it's about that also. And then the last thing I mentioned too is your salespeople are running into the same problem. Well, if they're doing the same things, talking to the same kind of people, they're running into the same problems typically. And they might need a toolkit in their back pocket to get over those objections that they're hearing in the field. So you run into this once, you probably don't need a tool to help overcome it. But if your salespeople are running into it day after day after day, build them a brochure, build them a widget online, build them something that helps them overcome that objection for the client, because it suits your business. And really, ultimately, the idea of the process to help sellers be more successful. And as long as your goals are aligned, that's a win-win for everyone in the organization.
Fantastic. So, you've worked with a number of companies, obviously different size companies, different, sales cycles involved. Just for, a sense, how long does it take to, really put together a sales process and then build it into a CRM? Is this, a week, a year? What are we looking at here?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for perfection, you're probably talking, a few months, right? Because you need the market to speak back to you a little bit. But to get to that 75% solution, you can get that done in a good, hard working day. You can, because I mean, what we would do, there's a couple key steps. First, like understanding what the buyer's going through, understanding their buying process. That's step number one. Step number two is, well, how are we going to align to that buying process with a few things? What are the things that we're going to look to qualify a client for? What are the actions we're going to execute within that stage? What does it take to move to the next stage? And what do we want from the client to help us move to that next stage? So if we align all those things at each stage, then we're head and shoulders above where we were. And that really can be done in the course of a day. Bring all the people in that are going to affect that sales process or maybe affected by that sales process. You can knock that out in a good day.
Mhm.
CRM systems are so tailorable now. You can build that in, and then really just kind of building the habit. That's what takes time. That's what perfection looks like over time. But you can get a great start in the day.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And do you typically, see, a boost in sales just from putting these processes in place?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ultimately, yes, but that does take a little time, right? So if we're talking a sales cycle of 6 to 12, maybe 18 months, you'll see the sale, but it'll be displaced by that length of sales cycle, right? You'll see the results. So a big part of the sales process is that forecasting piece. If we know that 1 out of 10 opportunities are ultimately going to close, then we need to hustle to get 10 opportunities in for every close that we need. So in order to get opportunities in, maybe we need to make 10 calls per opportunity. So really, this is a way to help us focus on the action, on the leading action, rather than the lagging result. So the lagging result being dollars in, that's what we all want. But we can't go do dollars. We can do sales calls that ultimately lead to opportunities that lead to quotes that lead to dollars. But yeah, it's a disciplined focus on the actions that lead to the results we're looking for. That's the win early, and ultimately over time, your win comes in the form of dollars.
That makes a lot of sense. It's great to have those leading indicators as well as that, like you say, lagging indicator, the dollars,
Yeah.
coming in. So, yeah, from that, I can see where it'd give you a lot more confidence in your ability to project sales going forward.
Yeah. There's the thought that, you know, one thing I keep going back to, and especially with business leaders and technical organizations where they might have a very strong attachment to their operations team, they're going to hold them very accountable to those processes that laid out. Oftentimes, that same business leader is going to look at their sales organization and say, "Hey, how'd it go?" And they'll be okay with the answer if we had a couple good meetings, there's a couple good opportunities in the pipeline, a big fluffy cloud of opportunity that there's no visibility into, and that simply isn't good enough. Sales or business leaders need to hold accountable their sales organizations like they would their operations organizations. It's the same thing. We know the things that lead to we know the things we need to do to lead to the results we're looking for across the organization. That's a management practice that should hold true in sales, and far too often it just isn't.
Hmm. Great. So that kind of leads to sales management, obviously, or that is sales management in large degree.
Right.
So excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, good. Any final tips as we wrap up here?
Sure. Yeah. I would just say, it's really, I mean, all this documentation, all this planning, all these tools we're talking about, they're all fine and good. They're all the background you need, but it ultimately comes down to action. And everything we're doing is try to position our salespeople for success, making sure they're doing the right actions. So doing the right things enough times will ultimately lead to success and scalable growth. Your sales process helps you identify those actions and ensure your team is accountable to what you're expecting them to do from those actions, right? What you're expecting them to do in the field. So yeah, I'd leave it at that. Driving scalable action is really what this is all about.
Great summary. I like that.
Thanks.
Great. Well, for anybody who wants to learn more, you can get in touch with Ryan by following the links in this post.
Great. Thanks so much, Carl.
Thanks,
Enjoyed it.
Ryan.